Hello everybody. Following on from last week when we looked at the blood, we're now going to look at the vessels that make up the circulatory system. So you probably remember quite a bit from year 9, but just in case you don't, we're going to really start from scratch. So obviously there's words like arteries, veins and capillaries, and hopefully you remember that the arteries take blood from the heart and they divide up into smaller arteries. Now they're called arterioles, but you don't need to worry about that name. So the arteries take blood away from the heart. They branch into capillaries. So you'd find capillary beds like this in all of your organs and in your skin and so on. And then the capillaries join up to form small veins called venules, but again, you don't need to learn that name at GCSE. And finally, to form veins, which will then carry the blood back to the heart. So the main ones are arteries, take blood away from the heart. They divide up into capillaries and then they join up to form veins and they take the blood back to the heart. So if we look at this diagram, we can see that the heart has got two sides to it. And when you label a heart or any organ belonging to a body, it's as if the heart is sitting in front of you, or maybe if that was me standing, that would be my left side. If I was facing you, my left side and my right side. So we've got an L here for left and an R for right. In your book, it mightn't be very clear, so you might just want to write a big L and a big R over there. So we can see that this side here is pumping blood that's going all the way around your body. We haven't drawn all the arteries on, but that's going to take the blood to your arms, your legs, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, all those kind of parts of your body. And then this vein brings it back to the right side of your heart. And it's the right side of your heart then that pumps the blood to the lungs. Okay, so what side of your heart pumps the blood to the lungs? The right. What does the left do? It pumps it round the rest of the body. Now, you've noticed that one side has got blood that's coloured in red and the other side is blue. And you might remember that red usually represents oxygenated blood. So if we look, when it changes from blue to red when it passes through the lungs. So we learnt earlier in the year before Christmas about how in the alveoli, the oxygen diffuses into the blood. So it picks up oxygen and so the blood is now red, oxygenated blood, and goes back to the left side of your heart and it's pumped again, and this time it goes to all of the parts of your body. And that's where it gives up the oxygen to the cells that need it for respiration and picks up the carbon dioxide. And so now the blood is deoxygenated, it's given up more or less all of its oxygen, travels back to the heart, which then pumps it to the lungs, and the whole process starts again. Now, if we look at that, we can see that there's really two circulatory systems, one supplying really the rest of your body or all of your body, except for the lungs because they have their own circulatory system. And if you were to follow a blood cell as it did one complete circuit of your body, say it started off here, so go down there into your heart once, up to the lungs, it gets oxygenated, into the heart a second time before it gets back to where it started. So we say blood travels through the heart twice in one circulation of the body, and that's the case for all mammals. All mammals have what we call a double circulatory system. So that is really your definition. At the bottom of page 6 it says the human circulatory system is described as a double circulation because, and you're going to write that phrase in there, the blood travels through the heart twice in one circulation of the body. Now, quite often in exams they'll say what is meant by a double circulatory system, so you have to learn that, and that's the answer you write for that kind of question. So let's go back to arteries, veins and capillaries. So if you were to cut through an artery, a vein and a capillary, they would look a bit like that. Now the capillary is tiny, and so that would be it more or less drawn to scale. In fact, it would probably be much smaller than that. but it's drawn a little bit bigger so you can see the detail there. The space in the middle of those vessels is called the lumen, and that's where the blood's going to flow. And you can see that the artery has a smaller lumen than a vein. Now this one is the smallest of all, but generally we say that arteries have a small lumen, veins have a large lumen. And you remember that we said that arteries carry blood away from the heart. So the heart is really pumping it under high pressure. The arteries need to have these thick muscular walls to maintain that high pressure. And if you think about it, the heart is pumping the blood in pulses. So if this was your artery, okay, if this is your artery, it gets a pulse of blood being pumped, so it stretches out. The artery needs to be able to recoil and go back to its normal shape. So as well as muscle fibres there, it has elastic fibres to help it spring back into shape. So big thick layer of muscle and elastic fibres. Capillaries then. So the arteries divide up into lots of capillaries. They're tiny. Their walls are only 1 cell thick, and that's so that they will allow some things to pass through, things like oxygen and glucose, and we'll come to that in a bit more detail later on. The veins take the blood from the capillaries. The blood is slowed down a lot. It's not under high pressure anymore, so that these veins don't need to have thick muscle or lots of elastic fibres, so their walls are much thinner. They have a structure called valves, which we'll look at in a moment, because the problem is the fact that there isn't high pressure and there's a tendency for the blood to sort of fall backwards, and so valves will help prevent that from happening. So the artery, high blood pressure, the blood slows down as it gets through the capillaries, loses the pressure, loses the speed, and is really just trickling back through the veins. So these blood vessels, the arteries, need to have a thick muscular wall with lots of elastic fibres. These ones don't. Now, if we look at the diagram that you have at the top of page 7, I'm not expecting you to be able to read what it says there, but we've got the lumens there. We can see that the artery, if we look at it first of all, just a reminder, we need to fill in the notes there. So we're thinking arteries carry blood away from the heart. The way I remember that, A for artery, A for away. And if we look back at this diagram, we're saying that this is the main artery in your body, and it subdivides into all the arteries that take blood to your kidneys, your liver, your pancreas, your arms, your legs, your brain, and so on. So all those arteries are going to be carrying oxygenated blood. And there's only one artery, and it's this one here, which doesn't. It's carrying deoxygenated blood up to the lungs, and it's called the pulmonary artery. Now I'll write that for you. So pulmonary artery is spelt P-U-L-M-O-N-A-R-Y. Pulmonary artery, and that's the pulmonary artery there carrying deoxygenated blood. So it's the only artery that's carrying deoxygenated blood. So get back to here, thick muscular walls, lots of elastic fibres, and that's because the blood's travelling at high blood pressure. It's just left the heart, and the vessels need to recoil when the pulse of blood passes through. Onto the capillaries. So the capillaries take blood from the blood flows from the arteries to the capillaries and then to the vein. And we don't say that the capillary walls are thin, we say that they're only 1 cell thick. Okay, they're really, really thin. All these other vessels have got lots and lots of layers of cells. This is only 1 cell thick. The vein, therefore, the veins, we move on to the notes there, they're carrying blood back to the heart. And if we look back at this diagram, the veins coming back up from your arms and your legs and your brain and so on, they're carrying deoxygenated blood. The one exception, this one here, carrying the blood from the lungs back to the heart. Obviously, it's picked up all the oxygen, it's oxygenated, so that's the exception. All the veins carry deoxygenated blood except for this one here, and it's called the pulmonary vein. Okay, so that's Pulmonary, pulmonary vein. So veins have got much thinner walls. That's because the blood's under low pressure just. By the time the blood reaches the veins, the main problem is actually that it's slowed down. And there is a danger, if you think of the arteries in your legs, this is, sorry, not the arteries, the veins in your legs, blood's trying to flow upwards against gravity, and that's very difficult. So sometimes the blood will start to sort of fall back down again. So there are special structures called valves. So there's a valve. And when the blood flows up here, it pushes the valves to the side. So these valves will get pushed to the side. And the blood flows on up there. And if the blood tries to flow back down again, it'll flow back in here and actually push these valves closed so the blood won't flow further down. So if you think about your hands, these are the flaps in the valve. Blood's forced upwards, it pushes the valves open. The blood tries to flow back down again, it gets caught in here and forces the valves closed. Now, so as we said, the valves prevent backflow of blood, and that keeps blood flowing in the one direction, the right direction. Okay, going back to the capillary then. The capillary, you find capillaries in all of the different organs you have, so in the kidneys, in the liver, and in your brains. The blood's travelling more slowly, and as you can see there are tiny little pores there that will allow the liquid parts of blood out. So some of the plasma will leak out through there, and that plasma will take things with it, like obviously a lot of water, but also glucose, amino acids, some oxygen, salts, potassium, magnesium, and things like that. And so you'll have a lot of oxygen dissolved in that fluid, and that will be bathing all of the tissue cells of the organ. And if there's a lot of oxygen in that fluid, it will diffuse into the cells that need it for respiration. Those respiring cells will make carbon dioxide, and so that will diffuse the other way. So if I can just clean this. So if we've got a capillary and we're saying things can leak out of it, so things like oxygen will be dissolved in the fluid, glucose, amino acids, just some of the things that would be in a high concentration in the blood, that leaks out into the fluid. And then we've got the body cells that will be making things like carbon dioxide and urea, spelled U-R-E-A. Those things will move in that direction. They will diffuse in that direction back into the blood. And so the blood's giving up oxygen, picking up carbon dioxide, it's giving up glucose and amino acids, and it's picking the waste product of urea up. Okay, so you need to fill all that information into page 7. So you may want to pause the video now and make sure you've got your notes completed. On page 8, you've got, at the top of page 8, you've got this table, which is really just a summary of the main points of that we've covered. And you've got some phrases that you need to fill into there. So what you should do, pause the video now, take a few minutes, get a pencil, jot down what you think are the answers, and then we'll check them in a minute or two. So you should be pausing the video now. Okay, so let's look at the answers. Arteries, A for artery, A for away from the heart. Veins bring it back to the heart, and capillaries are the link between the arteries and the veins. Arteries, hopefully you remembered that they had thick or very thick walls. Veins had much thinner walls. And capillaries, in fact, they're so thin that they're only one cell thick. Blood pressure is going to be high or very high because it's just coming straight from the heart. And it's going to be low when it gets to the capillaries and low when it gets to the veins. So those are both low. We only mentioned valves when we talked about veins. So they're the only blood vessels that have valves. The arteries don't and the capillaries don't. So your table should look something like that, or you've probably written no, yes and no there. So if you got that all right, give yourself a pat on the back. If we look at the circulatory system, we just got the main veins here. Now don't worry, I know you can't read the names there. You're not expected to read them. You're not expected to know them all. But we've got a simpler version of this diagram. It's really a sort of like a block diagram of it. We're going to think of the names because you need to learn the names of the main arteries and the main veins. So we're going to start off with this one here. And this one is the main artery that takes the blood away from the heart and then divides up to supply all the rest of the body. And that main artery has a special name, so it is an artery, but its special name is the aorta. And it's the biggest blood vessel in your body, and it's about the size of your thumb in diameter. So it's about, you could, if you had a human heart in front of you, you could stick your thumb into the aorta. Now, the aorta subdivides into arteries. So the artery that supplies your liver is called the hepatic artery, H-E-P-A-T-I-C, hepatic artery. We're going to move down here to the kidney, and a word you've probably heard is renal. So renal means to do with the kidney, so the renal artery is taking blood to the kidney. This vessel is obviously taking the deoxygenated blood away from the kidney, so you've probably guessed that's the renal vein. And this is coming away from the liver, so the word is hepatic, and it's a vein, so that's the hepatic vein. There are other arteries and other veins taking blood to your arms, your legs, your brain, and so on, but you don't need to learn those, so we haven't put those in the diagram. But all of those arteries that we've mentioned from all those organs will join together, joining to form this main artery, which is called the vena cava, which is actually Latin for great vein. And you can see why it gets the name, because that's where all the arteries join together to form it and take the blood back to the heart. This one here we've mentioned already. It's an artery, even though it's coloured in blue. It's an artery, it's taking deoxygenated blood up to the lungs. So hopefully you've remembered that's the pulmonary artery. And the pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood, and it's carrying it back to the heart to be pumped out again. Now, you might have noticed that there's one that we haven't labelled, and it's because it's quite unusual. It's not an artery because it's coming from the small intestine. It's not coming from the aorta, it's coming from the small intestine. And you might remember when we studied digestion that the blood flows from the ileum, from the villi and the ileum, it'll flow to the liver through a blood vessel called the hepatic portal vein. So that is the hepatic portal vein. It's a vein because it's coming away from the intestine, but it's taking it to the liver. So hepatic portal vein. If you're not sure of the spellings, you can check them in your textbook. It's page 90. So it's got that diagram. Check to make sure you've got the spellings right. Then at the top of the next page, you've got a summary table. And again, what you should do, pause the video now, jot in your answers because I'm going to give them in a few seconds. So just pause the video now. Okay, this is really easy. All you have to do is remember A for artery, A away from the heart. Okay, so pulmonary, if you remember, pulmonary means connected to the lungs. We've got pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein. Kidney, hopefully that you remembered that was renal, so renal artery, renal vein. Liver, the word is hepatic, so hepatic artery, hepatic vein. That should have been pretty straightforward. And what you're going to do now is you're going to write the names of the blood vessels on this diagram in page 9 in your booklet. Okay, number 1 and number 11, you don't actually have to know for GCSE. So I'm going to give you the answers to them because I wouldn't expect you to know it and it's not in your textbook. So number 1 is taking blood from the heart to your head and your arms. So that's the carotid artery. And number 11 is taking it back down from there. You've maybe heard of this, the jugular vein. So those are the answers to 1 and 11. You need to write down the names of 2 right through to 10. And then your next assignment is to answer the quiz, which asks you what did you write down for 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. Okay, so when you do the quiz, you should get corrections or the correct answer coming up if you've got something wrong. So if you've made a mistake, change your notes, because you don't want to be learning the wrong thing when it comes to your GCSEs. Okay, and then what you can do is use your textbook, page 90, to fill in the answers to this page here, which is page 10 in your notes, and that's this week's work finished then. Okay, thanks very much. Bye.